Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, 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 and thank you for joining us today for this version of Her Version. This platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Elizabeth Burrows. Have you ever wanted to edit your life? I know I have. Not make it over, not delete it entirely, but just edit it just a little bit. Elizabeth is here today to talk about her journey through not feeling adequate as a woman, a wife, or a mother, her struggle with expectations, and feeling alone. Today, we are talking real life, the ups and downs of just everyday life, what it means to struggle, and why struggle isn't necessarily a bad thing. I want to welcome Miss Elizabeth. How are you today?
Were so heavy. I was like, if I can lighten this burden by making a decision, then that's what I want to do, right? And then there were other decisions that weren't as important, but they were annoying if I didn't make them, or if I was letting other people choose for me. Those, like the consequences of outsourcing decisions to other people, was really uncomfortable. And once I learned to recognize that too, then I got to kind of reclaim some of my choices.
Absolutely. I still remember it was a huge turning point for me when I realized I could make choices. And I remember everywhere I went, I would be like, I have a choice.
Yes.
The number one thing that I would tell people, like, I have a choice.
Yeah.
I have choices. Did you know that you have choices?
Yes.
Because it was such a unknown, like, treasure that I had dug up. And I had no idea. It's so crazy.
Yeah. And I think even part of that is just recognizing that sometimes it feels like we have no choice because we don't like the choices that are in front of us, right? Like the things that we get to choose between, they all suck, right? And when we're in those situations, it can feel like, oh, I have no choice. But no, like if you actually lean into choosing the sucky thing, it's actually really empowering. Like, and I know it's counterproductive or counterintuitive. It sounds like it would be really deflating to decide on purpose to choose something that you're not happy with. But exercising your own agency in any situation is always an empowering position to be in.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think your daughter has benefited from this?
I'm laughing because
not all parents like know this stuff.
Yeah, no. Oh, hands down. For sure.
Yeah.
Actually, I want to go back to something that you said earlier about motherhood, just like how you tell your son all the time, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I remember very vividly, I think my daughter was about 2 years old, 2.5 years old. And I remember her, no, maybe she was about 3. And there was something happening at her school for Halloween. And there is some kind of expectation about like having a costume ready for like a parade or something. I don't know what was happening. And it was something like I had gotten an email on it, but got busy, right? Didn't really pay attention to the email. So the thing snuck up on me. And my daughter asks me like the night before, Mommy, do you have XYZ so I can be in the costume parade or whatever? And I was like, no, I don't. And then I was like, well, she'll be disappointed. So let me pull something together last minute, right? So I pulled something together and I had this flashback to a very similar scenario of me at a young age needing a costume for something. and my parents pulling something together last minute. And I remember feeling like they did not care what I wanted or how I felt. And being in the position of like being the parent that was pulling something together last minute, I realized, oh my gosh, it wasn't that they didn't care. They just like were busy doing the rest of life. Right.
Yeah, yeah.
And as parents, we're not perfect. And sometimes we miss things. Right. And then we're stuck, left, we're trying to make the best of it. Right.
Yeah.
And as a kid, that can often look like, oh, my parents don't care, so they're just doing this ratty thing. When in actuality, it's our parents trying really hard to save the situation, right? And so I had this realization, like I looked back and just kind of saw what I saw my mom do, and I had new appreciation for it and kind of a new perspective on it. And I was like, oh my gosh, my mom was also a working professional that had not just one kid, like I'm the youngest of 4, right? And I was like, oh, my mom was lifing hard and she was doing the absolute best. And I can totally see how having a costume for some random thing at school maybe was not on her radar. I can totally see that had nothing to do with her not caring, that was just the best she could do in that situation. And I was able to realize, like, none of us have this all figured out. We're all making this up as we go. And we're all just doing the best that we can. And I was able to kind of give myself such grace and compassion in that moment. And I was hoping that my daughter would not experience like what I was doing as me not caring. Right. Yeah. So I think just having that awareness that what I'm doing and what my daughter perceives me doing can be different, and being able to like speak to it on purpose makes a world of difference. And so I am aware that my daughter is watching me and she is listening to me and she is trying to emulate me, right? Like she looks up to me so much. And so I am cautious of like what I show her, and I try to show her on purpose that things aren't always easy, and that sometimes I get frustrated or lose my temper, or sometimes I'm sad and I cry, or sometimes I don't want to be touched, right? And I try to tell her that and let her know that none of that has anything to do with how much I love her, so that she's getting these messages early and knowing that if I take the time to show up as the person I want to be, I'm also giving her permission to do the same for herself.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was just having a conversation with my mom. I talked to my mom like 2 hours the other day, and I was telling her this story about my dad and how my dad, we were talking about trauma, and how our father, my father, her husband, used to say to us, don't ever have children. He used to say to his children, don't ever have children. And I was like, that was like a big deal for me, because that in my head, I registered that as he never wanted us.
Yes.
Don't ever do what I did. Yep. And I was telling her that now I'm kind of stuck in, and I held resentment, and still kind of do to this day. Like I'm still kind of like, what the heck? Why would you do that? Why would you say that? It's so unnecessary. But now my son is 18, and I had him out of wedlock. I got pregnant out of wedlock with his father, using no birth control, the pull-out method, and not my doing, his father's doing. I was just so naive and like had no voice and didn't like, whatever. I have a million excuses. So now I'm stuck with a son who's 18, and I now having to sit down with him and tell him, hey, don't do what I did. And I was telling my mom, and I was crying. I'm like, it feels very similar to the hurt that I felt from dad by him saying that. But he had his reasons for saying it. He was probably low on money, he had 3 kids, he's like trying to make ends meet, and he's sitting around being like, don't do what I did. Like, don't have 3 kids. And now I'm having to sit down and have a very similar conversation with my son that could be hitting him in a very similar way of, you never wanted me.
Yeah.
Don't do what I did. Ooh. So it's interesting, as we turn and we have our own children and we come across our own hurdles that we're coming through as parents, that sometimes we just like what you said, which is why I'm telling the story. Sometimes we recognize why our parents did or said whatever they said, and it makes more sense
Yep.
now that
Yep.
we're older.
Yep.
Crazy.
Yeah. And, I don't think there's ever such a thing as like perfect communication between parents and children, because we're in different places, right? And we're speaking from different perspectives and different levels of experience, right? And so, but I do believe that the more awareness we have of both how we perceived something that we like an experience with our parents, right? And the more awareness we have of what it is we're actually trying to communicate and what we're actually trying to teach our children, all of that allows us to reach a higher level of communication, right?
Yeah.
And just kind of narrow that gap between what we mean and what they take away.
I love that you're saying that, because my dad said that one sentence to us all the time versus me. I'm sitting down and having long conversations with my son about how I love you. I say that I love you. However, I would never change anything for myself. However, I wouldn't wish this. Like if I had to choose it for somebody else, I wouldn't wish this on somebody else. So here's condoms. And, please use protection. And it's important for you, and it's important for the women who you are, engaging with, to be protected. And, that her responsibility and also your responsibility, not just her responsibility. So having ongoing, not just one conversation, but ongoing conversations about stuff like that. So yeah, to what you're saying, yes, do it, just do it differently. With more conversation.
Yeah. Yeah. Which also means like when I'm scrambling for that last minute costume, right? Yeah. I'm not just doing it and handing it off to my daughter and expecting her to love it the way she would love a perfectly planned costume, right?
Yeah.
It means that I'm also explaining, I'm so sorry, right? Like I forgot, but here is what I can do for you now.
Yeah.
And I hope that you still have a good time, right? It means saying all of that, right?
Yeah.
Which can be hard as a parent, because part of it is, we want our children to believe in us and trust us and see us as protectors and providers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes showing that vulnerability or, owning up to our mistakes can be in conflict, right, with that position of authority. But we're teaching them so much more
100%.
About what it really means to show up and to be responsible, right? Like I'm not just my daughter's mom, I'm also her teacher.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I am teaching her so many different things, whether I do it intentionally or not. So I want to be intentional with at least the things that I'm aware of.
Definitely.